Hi, everybody, and welcome to Life After Corona, a conversation between the elephant and concerned citizens on the past, present, and possible futures after this pandemic. Today, I'll be speaking to Patrick Gathara. Gathara is an award-winning cartoonist and a journalist based here in Nairobi, Kenya. Karibu, Gathara.
Asante sana.
Before we start, I just like to know how you're doing, how is the family, and how you guys coping with this pandemic, particularly because I know you have kids, school-going kids, and the idea of homeschooling, and I'm seeing it's a mess online. outside of course of the your current, your always ongoing displeasures about KPLC and Ngumo not having lights in Ngumo. How are you doing, Bwana?
We're doing well. Like everybody else, trying to cope with being stuck in the house. You point out the kids are at home. Well, they're doing their schooling using Zoom. I'm not sure how effective that is, but we're trying to keep tabs on it and to help them out where we can. I think this is the new normal for the next few months. So we have no choice other than to get used to it.
Mm-hmm. That's our side. So, quickly, let's just jump into it. And just quickly give me just a broad overview of how you've seen governments, not just in Kenya, but globally, US, Europe, other parts of Africa, Asia, how they've responded towards this COVID-19 so far.
Well, I think the governments have, in essence, used this crisis to enhance their own power. From when it broke out, you saw it very quickly with China, but I was kind of expected with the lockdown that they came in, and everybody thought that was draconian. That wouldn't be done elsewhere. Well, it's become the normal everywhere, and you can see almost an insistence by government that they require this sort of extraordinary power, almost an accountable power, in order to fight the disease. So we're all locked up in our houses. They come up, they give us a series of numbers, scary numbers, etc. And there's very little questioning that's encouraged. In the case of Kenya, for example, you see it. They quickly make a statement, take one or two questions, and then walk away. I know it's different in other parts of the world. South Africa, I think, had one that went up 3 hours or something. Everyone watches the US one, which is sometimes pretty long before Trump now ran away from it. So there are differences, but there is still this sort of general theme of governments becoming more and more trusted, if you will. We're all being urged to simply obey what they tell us. They roll out this panel of scientists, and they tell us how all these restrictions are justified by the science, is almost dictated by the science. And I am quite uncomfortable by this notion that we cannot question it, that we are not allowed to debate the choices that they are making, as if it is the scientists making decisions. And nobody elected the scientists. These are political decisions being made. These are judgment decisions that are being taken by politicians. And we need to be able to ask, on what basis are they doing this? Are these the only options that they have, that we have as a society? And are there better ways of tackling this? And I think the more you hear phrases such as, it is not the time to point fingers, it is the time to come together and simply obey, I think that's when we really need to be scared. It's not the first time this has happened. You remember during the terrorism crisis, which peaked between 2013 and 2016, there was much of the same talk that no, we shouldn't really question government. You should simply support them, honor our troops, be patriotic, just follow and obey what you're told. And lots of the freedoms that we lost then, we've never gotten them back. And I think we have to be really careful, because lots of what we might lose during this crisis, it's unlikely that we'll ever actually get it back.
So quick one. Recently, you recently published an article in The Elephant talking about how government of Kenya is tackling COVID-19 using colonial edicts. And would you kindly elaborate on what did you mean by this and how it's manifesting today?
Well, we've seen how the government has treated the corona response. It's essentially been presented in a series of directives. They themselves call them directives that then call for obedience. And we've now gotten used to sort of constantly being about or berated about our lack of obedience, and being threatened by even more measures if we don't obey. And this is almost as if we are petulant children who simply really got to do what the adult is telling us, and the adult here being the state. That's a very colonial way of viewing people. When the white guys came here, that's how they saw us. That's how they treated Africans, basically. As children incapable of reason, people who best were tackled using force, and it's something that we have continued to date. It's this attitudes that are infused within the way government relates to its people. And so, enforcing a curfew that's supposed to be for the benefit of the people is done using clubs. Police go out on the streets with tear gas and whips. How is this a way to treat a pandemic, a health crisis? And you could see in this thinking, in how they view us, is very much not as fully grown, mature adults. There's still this idea that we've got to be civilized, to be taught manners, to be taught obedience and how to be adults, rather than actually sitting down with us and talking to us, actually persuading us that this is what is required. Because if democracy is anything, it is us ruling ourselves, not putting in a government that then beats us up and tells us what to do. And it's always got to be a government that seeks consent. And unfortunately, we do not see consent being prioritized by this government. It is more about obedience. It's more about simply towing the line. And that, to me, is a real throwback to colonial.
Talking about even colonial edicts. Someone listening to this at home might be wondering, we're 56 years into independence. Why are we still talking about the colonial state and these colonial edicts? Someone might come and say, come on, Gathara, we got independence in 1963. Why are we still pandering about, colonialism and the colonial state?
We've got to distinguish between independence, which was a political act, and liberation or decolonization. These are not the same things. In essence, we were given independence. We were given a flag. We were given an anthem. We were given a president with a big motorcade. And ministers who could fly flags on their cars. But the thing, the state continued very much as it had been prior to 1963. And you don't have to take my word for it. Masinde Muliro in 1966 says we've got a black man's government, yet that government enforces the very same rules in the very same way that the white colonial government did. So there's nothing much that changed, in the sense of a systemic change. Gitu Muigai, writing in a paper in 1982, Gitu Muigai, the former Attorney General, essentially says that that there was the colonial apparatus which did not rely, on our consent, did not rely on our constitution, on one body of law, as he puts it, essentially was retained after independence. And when we brought in a constitution and tried to reform that colonial apparatus, what happened was the constitution itself got changed, the apparatus remained. And that's what I call the colonial state. That's what stayed. That is the basis under which we are governed. It's never changed. Our most recent attempt to change it is the 2010 Constitution. Look what's happening to that, and the difficulties we are having enacting the vision that was in that Constitution. When we want to get rid of the provincial administration, suddenly it can't go. It's simply called something different, and it is retained. The police force, we call it a police service, yet it behaves exactly the same way it behaved prior to 2010. So these continuities within the state are what convinced me that actually we did not decolonize. And I think we need to have a conversation as Kenyans about what decolonization would mean. What is it? What was the vision of people like Dedan Kimathi when they were in the forest? What did they think about how Kenya should be run? Did we really simply think that the problem was, we have some white guys who rule over us, we get rid of them, but keep things pretty much the same? Or are there fundamental things that require changing? And why they actually? And it's not just Kenya that needs this conversation. It is the entirety of Africa. Across Africa, you still have, in essence, colonial states that continue, with black guys ruling in the place of white people, but essentially keeping a system that was built, designed to oppress and steal, and they retain it, and notice at how efficient that system is across Africa at extracting goods, at extracting resources, at extracting dignity from the majority of the people and feeding it up to a tiny minority. It does that very well because that is what it was built to do. It was just that the people at the top were meant to be white. We replaced them with black guys, but still feeding up our resources up there. So that's why you can hear today in Kenya, for example, the government proudly announces that the 29 people who died in the mudslides, was it in West Pokot? We'll give them 50,000 shillings each, their families, for the burials. But it spent hundreds of millions to bury William Olentimama. It spent hundreds of millions to bury Lucy Kibaki. It spent hundreds of millions to bury Daniel Arap Moi. These single people take the huge share of the national resource, as if we exist for their sake. We exist to make life better for them, not the other way around. And that is really what a colonial state was built to do, was to feed our resources up to the colonials. That's why they had things like a hard tax, where they would come around and pick money simply because you've got a hut, and they take it for themselves, So throughout, this is how things have been run. And we need to get much more serious about how we reform this state and actually have a discussion. I wouldn't even rush into what is the solution. Let's actually have a discussion, a chat about what is it that we want out of the state. It wasn't ours. We didn't invent it. It was imposed upon us. We want to retain it. Let's start there. If we want to retain it, in what form do we want to retain it? To do what? What's the relationship we should have with it? And I think if we started having that discussion, then we can actually come to a point where the things that we put in place, we can start asking, rather than building on a rotten foundation, we can excavate the entire foundation, take it out, and then say, all right, let's start afresh, and build up something that works for us rather than works for just a few people.
I mean, speaking of the colonial state, I mean, you're talking about 1963 I mean, Kenya got, as you said, political independence. And then we passed a Majimo constitution, which was, the history, it was completely butchered. We fought for 1992 multi-party. We thought it was a step forward. We removed Moi into O2, thinking that he was the Leviathan in the step of Kenya's progress. In 2010, after PV in 2007, we passed the constitution that we have hailed as one of the most progressive in the world. And then my question would be, despite all these reforms, whether in constitutionally, but also even numerous commissions, what do we miss? What do we miss to move forward? What's the Achilles heel in this space we call Kenya? Is it the political class? Is it the international system? Is it the people themselves, as the BBI report told us before? What are we missing?
Now, what we're missing is that colonial state. That's the thing we are skirting throughout. If we're going to reform is not simply passing a constitution. The constitution itself is not reform. The constitution just gives you a vision of what you want to have. And what sometimes we do is we mistake that vision for the reality. The reality is not the constitution. Constitution is not what comes and bangs down your door in the middle of the night. It's not what clubs a 6-month-old baby. And what you've got to ask is, to what extent have we actually implemented this vision? To what extent have we actually made the constitution alive? Such that things work because the constitution says this is how they should work. To the extent that it is ignored, and we know in a very large way it is ignored, in our government measures, in how government relates to us, in whether or not it lives up to things like the 2/3 gender principle, in the fact that 77 or several dozen people were killed during the post-election violence or in 2017, and nobody has been punished for it. We know that is the constitution being ignored. And we've got then to ask ourselves, when we are changing, what is it we are changing? Are we simply changing the form of things and ignoring their substance? Are we saying police reforms is simply, let's put an institution called IPOA and then hope things will work? If IPOA gets its investigations, has to hire or has to incorporate policemen to do its own investigation, how likely is it that the police will investigate themselves or their own colleagues? We've got to ask these questions. We've got to ask, when you see the president stand up every day or in many days and give an order to the police commissioner, when the constitution expressly says he cannot do this, and we allow it because we think, he's protecting us, whatever. We are undermining that very document. So we've got the form, but not the substance of the vision that the Constitution wants. And until we actually get to grips with why it is we don't get the substance, why we are always at this point of having the form, why we do the TJRC report, we spend $2 billion on it. We interview 40,000 people, which is the most any Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission anywhere in the world has done. And then we bury it, then it is forgotten. It doesn't influence anything. It doesn't change anything, So what was this exercise for? Was it just something for show? And until we come to grips to that and we say, well, actually this, whatever it is that we are passing has got to work for us. It is not about our politicians. If you look at the post-election agreement, coalition agreement, the national accord itself, it's interesting. The first 3 agenda items, were very quickly affected. And they're very quickly affected because they affected the politicians, So whether it was getting together and having the agreement, creating positions, etc., the Grand Coalition Cabinet, etc., all that was done immediately. Agenda 4, which was now about us, was about historical injustices, was about let us fix the things that are at the root of why we end up with electoral violence. That was forgotten. So again, it was about the form. It was about, oh, it looks like we are sorting out things, but really what they wanted was their chance on the gravy train. So we've got to, again, I think, be pushing. When the Kibwana used to talk about people-driven systems, that's where we need to go back to. Where it is not about what they get, it's about what we get. It's not about whether Raila becomes prime minister. It's not about whether Kenyatta gets a third term, or whatever. That doesn't matter. It is about whether it works for Kenya. So what we get at the end of it actually gives us something that we go back saying, this state is accountable to us, it belongs to us, it works for us.
Thanks for that, Gathara. You're talking about, again, just the colonial state. There's also a conversation that you've had before, you've written about it, with the media in particular, and how the media has been and is a pillar that actually endorses this colonial state. Within the current COVID-19 crisis, how has this played out in your view?
Well, I think our media is captured largely by the political class. It fails to question the motives and agendas of the political class, and that the state itself pushes. So throughout the whole COVID-19 crisis, we've not had much in terms of questioning what the state is doing, encouraging people to understand and ask questions about what it is, about the options that are being put to us. There's been this sort of push of simply obey, this repetition of what the state is saying. So I'll give an example. Every day we've got these numbers that are given to us about how many confirmed COVID cases that the government has found, how many have recovered, how many have died. And I have a question, what do these numbers mean? Does that mean that the whole of Kenya has, 320, 330 people with coronavirus? Probably not, given that we are testing and minuscule, I think it's something like 0.02% of the population that we test, or we've tested so far. So we really don't know. But these are numbers that are then provided, and the media regurgitates them as if they mean something. But what it is they mean, they don't tell us. We're told we need to go into lockdown. I say, okay, fine. Explain to us. Why is it that a country like South Korea did not go into a lockdown? What can we learn from there? Is the only option we have what the government is saying? Why do we have professors in places like South Africa arguing, well, actually, you guys, people in Africa cannot afford to simply copy what the West is doing. We don't have the resources to maintain what they can do. I was listening to CNN yesterday, and I think it was on Farid Zakaria. I would ask people to actually have a look at it. Speaking to Bill Gates, and they are also questioning, why are you guys in Africa trying to do what the West is doing? And he gave the example that in some slums, I think I also saw an article about this. I'm not sure it's in Time Magazine, but in some slums in Africa, they are so congested that the minimum distance that we ask for social distancing, you don't achieve it by being at home. And actually letting guys go to work might be the way to do social distancing. But we don't think about this. We don't try and adapt or we are not being encouraged to adapt the scientific advice to our own circumstances and come up with our own solutions. How do we do this? It's almost like, oh, we've got to ape what those guys are doing, you know. And this brings me back to how does our media then start mediating a conversation between people and the state? It is not doing this. It is simply repeating what the state is saying. It's not a space for a discussion. In fact, you're having much more honest, open discussion online on social media forums than you're having on our newspaper pages. And that is really a sad, sad comment about the press and about the role it is playing. I think that eventually it was going to be, I mean, hopefully that the media will start to learn that you cannot simply be a sounding board for the authorities. That you've got to be able to mediate and to ask questions, to stand in the space of citizens and to say, well, how important is this? Why is this important? To break down what is being given, to pick out what is important and to tell people, this is what you need to know. This is what matters here. And to encourage people to think through what their government is doing, because that's how then they start to hold the government to account, you know, rather than simply be this space where government speaks and the people really have they don't have the wherewithal to actually engage with what is being said.
I mean, so lastly, Gathara, because we have talked about this colonial state and reforming it, but as this year we mark 100 years of the Kenyan state, right? And still 100 years down the road, we're still talking about this thing. So my last question is: do we need this idea of Kenya to take place on, and if not, and if so, how do we reform it?
Well, you're right. We're getting into, I think later on this year, it will be 100 years since the Kenyan colony was established.
Precisely.
Was set up. So I think it's a good time for us to ask the question about whether the Kenya colony is still what we want, whether it's ever been what we wanted, you know. And if it is not, then what do we want in its place? You know, I think the first and initial thing that we need to do is to have the conversation. And I think that's what people keep running away from. They're all too quick to demand, let's have a solution, you know, before they actually understand what is the problem that we are solving, you know. So let's have the discussion, and let's not have limitations about what we can imagine for ourselves, you know. We don't have to have a state simply because a state exists in England or in the US, you know. We don't have to ape what they have. We make something that is ours, that is our own, you know. And I would say let's have a discussion about whether it is necessary, you know. Do we need the state? If we do, why do we need it? What do we want it to do, you know? And let's have that discussion. Let's acknowledge that people's experiences of this state are very different. You know, if you are in central Kenya, and how a guy in Nyanza, and how a guy in the northeast in Mandera or Garissa, how these three people experience the state is very different, you know. So can they get together and say, all right, this is what we want, you know? Is there even the basis for doing that? And I think we could find commonalities that then we agree ourselves that this is something we want, you know. And I think the TJRC report was supposed to give us a space to have that discussion. If you read through it, it goes all the way back to the pre-independence piece. Doesn't spend too much time discussing that. But what it tries to do is to gather Kenyans' experience of this thing we call the state. You know, how they have experienced it across the breadth of our country, you know, and to say, well, here's a starting point. You can start saying, this has been the historical experience. Is this something we want to continue? What do we want to change? What do we think is better? And I think if we start crafting a better and a more informed idea of what our own history is, then that would allow us to start crafting a better idea of what the future can be. And it would be something that is not borrowed. It won't be Vision 2030 that is sort of painted to look like a futuristic New York or something. It is something we decide that we want. Whether we're talking about education system, whether it's about policing, it's not just something that we adopt because it is done elsewhere. We sit and we say, we want the police because we want them to be like this. Do we want them to stay with us? Do we want them to put them in barracks as the colonials did? Do we want to have an army? Do you want to be like Costa Rica, which doesn't have an army? Or Japan, which is a pacifist state? These are all options. And what I'm saying is we don't need to lock ourselves into particular imaginations. We can actually act like free people and decide for ourselves and do the unfinished work, which is where we'll end. The unfinished work of 1963. Decolonization did not happen. We got independence, but we did not decolonize. We continued with the colonial state, with the colonial tropes and the colonial ways of being. So that is the work that remains. And I think that our generation can actually go back and say, well, let's pick that up. Let's say, all right, we are not going to have our kids go through these things. We're going to actually go do the work that our fathers didn't do. See it, negotiate, talk about what we want, and refashion this thing we call the SIS to be what we want. And I think if we did that, then our kids can actually look to a future where they are free to be whatever they want without having to constantly battle this thing that was imposed on us 100 years ago.
Oh, Gathara, on that very powerful note, I'll end this here.
So, thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks a lot, Buana. Say hi to pass my regards to the family, Buana.
I will.
Okay. Okay.